A student vanishes during a field trip and wakes up in an ancient Aztec world where she's mistaken for a reincarnated priestess. A deadly ritual looms. She runs. The jungle traps her. A masked god hunts her through shifting shadows. Villagers prepare her for sacrifice. A mysterious warrior risks everything to stop it. But her reflection isn't hers, it's the priestess who once defied the gods. Is this fate or punishment? Time twists, reality bends, fire consumes the sky. When she wakes up, nothing feels real, except the drum beats still echoing. This isn't just a dream, it's a second chance, or the final trap. I never paid much attention to dreams. Most of mine were too vague or random. But lately, one kept returning, always the same. A stone altar, a circle of silent faces, and me lying still under the weight of smoke and drums. My name is Elira. I'm 23, studying anthropology at Westport. Last month we flew to Mexico for a field assignment. Professor Haynes was leading us through ruins said to belong to a lesser-known Aztec sect. The site was quiet, buried in moss and age. The others were documenting carvings near the temple stairs. I drifted toward a stone chamber. Inside I found a mask, bone white, smooth and polished like it had been touched yesterday. I knew I shouldn't, but I reached out. My fingers barely grazed it, then everything went black. I woke up under a crimson sky. The forest around me buzzed with insect cries. Heat clung to my skin like oil. The mask was gone. My clothes had changed. I wore fabric I didn't recognize, beads hanging from my arms. I wasn't alone. A man named Jalen found me by a river. He spoke my name before I told him, said I'd returned. He called me Yalira, a priestess from their history, long vanished. I told him he was wrong. He only looked away. He brought me to a village built in stone and smoke. It felt real. The air, the touch of earth beneath my feet, the way people stared when I passed. A woman named Ania whispered prayers when she saw me. A boy, Tamar, hid behind her. They feared me. That night I heard drums again, just like in the dream. Jalen told me the god of bone was stirring. His hunger returned. Each generation, one must be given. But something had changed. He said the god wanted me, not a stranger, me. I tried to run. I made it to the trees before the forest shifted. Paths bent, shadows grew thick. I saw him, tall, cloaked in ash and smoke. The bone god. His face looked like the mask. No eyes, no mouth, just hollow silence that pulled you in. Jalen found me. He pulled me back. He swore he'd stop the ritual, but the elders believed my sacrifice would end the drought, the storms, the chaos. They didn't care who I used to be. They believed I belonged to the god. Anea brought me a mirror. My reflection wasn't mine. It was her. Yalira, the priestess who once betrayed the god by fleeing her duty. Her punishment was rebirth, endless return until she accepted her fate. I didn't believe in curses, not until I saw the altar from my dream, waiting. The night of the ritual, Jalen stood in front of me, weaponless, silent. Tamar slipped something into my hand, a shard of obsidian, barely sharp. I didn't use it. I walked to the altar. The sky above turned black. The god descended. But just as the wind swallowed the flames, Jalen stood between me and the altar. He whispered something I never understood. Then everything burned white. I woke up in a hospital near Oaxaca. The professor said I'd been missing 2 days. No one remembered the mask. But last night I found dirt on my shoes. My wrist still bore the beads. And in the dark corner of my room, I heard a slow drum beat. I've always had trouble sleeping in unfamiliar places. The sounds are different. The air feels heavier. That night, in the tiny guest house outside Tula, I kept waking up. Something about the silence between the crickets bothered me, like a missing note in a song you've heard too many times. We were supposed to be done with the field work. I was just tagging along with Finn, a photographer helping document local burial grounds. He was staying with an elder named Anna, who offered me her spare room. She spoke little English, but I could tell she knew something she wasn't saying. I didn't tell anyone what happened in the forest, how the sky split open, how Jalen vanished. It sounded insane. I needed to believe I was just sick from the heat, dehydrated, confused. But even after returning, I kept hearing drums in my sleep. 3 days passed quietly. Then one morning, Anna took my hand and pressed something into my palm, a stone carved into a shape I recognized instantly. The same mask, smaller, like a charm. She nodded toward the hills and whispered one word, return. I didn't ask questions. I packed light, told Finn I needed time alone, and left at dawn. I don't know why I went back. Maybe I thought seeing the ruins again would end the noise, or maybe I hoped to find Jalen. The trail was overgrown but familiar. The moment I stepped into the tree line, the heat changed. Time slowed. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. The sky dimmed, though it was still morning. Midway up the hill, I heard a voice behind me. Arlen. He said he'd been sent by Ania. She was alive and waiting. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in days. His eyes flicked toward the horizon often, like he was listening for something far away. We walked in silence until we reached the edge of a dry ravine. That's when I noticed the fog, thick, almost like smoke. It curled around our legs without a breeze. I asked Arlen how he found me. He only said we're connected. The ground shook lightly. I thought it was thunder, but there was no sound, just pressure, like the earth was breathing beneath us. We reached a clearing just before dusk. I saw it again, the altar, the same one from my dreams, my visions, my fear. But it wasn't stone anymore. It pulsed, covered in vines that moved on their own. And standing beside it, a figure cloaked in bone-white ash, the bone god. I froze. My feet wouldn't move. Arlen stepped forward, placing his hand on my shoulder. He whispered something, then walked ahead alone. The god turned toward him. No sound came, just stillness. Then as Arlen reached the altar, the vines receded. The ground quieted. He placed the small charm I'd carried onto the altar. The god lowered its head and vanished. I don't remember walking back, just flashes. The sound of leaves brushing my arms, Ania waiting at a fire, her eyes watery. Tamar asleep nearby. They called it the debt reversed, the act of one soul offering itself to delay the loop. I never asked Arlen what he gave. I think I already knew. Back home, I tried to return to class. Notes, lectures, papers. But some days, I hear the breath of the forest in the wind, the faint beat of a distant drum. And in quiet moments, when no one's watching, I reach into my bag and feel the stone mask, cold, smooth. I went back to campus thinking everything would fade with time. It didn't. At night, the mask whispered. I never saw its lips move, but I heard it. Words in a language I didn't know, yet somehow understood. Finn noticed. He said I talked in my sleep, not just mumbling, full conversations. Sometimes I laughed, sometimes I cried. Once, he said, I called out a name, Jalen. We were supposed to be done with Mexico, but the anthropology department was hosting a visiting scholar from Veracruz. Her name was Maura. She had seen the field notes from our expedition and wanted to speak to me directly. She didn't ask about the ruins. She asked if I had touched it. I said yes. Her face changed. She said the mask was a gate, not an artifact. It responded to echoes, repetition, guilt. She asked if I had broken a promise in another life. I couldn't answer. That night, I left the apartment. I walked without a coat, even though the air bit at my skin. I ended up near the museum. The anthropology wing was locked, but I had a key card. I don't remember taking it. Inside, everything was dim. Emergency lights cast long shadows. The exhibit on ancient rites had been updated. In the center stood a replica of the altar, but the replica wasn't there yesterday, and no one else had access. Maura stood behind me. She said I had to make a choice. Rejection was never the end, only delay. The god would return. As if in response, the power went out. A hum rose from the walls. The air thickened, tasted like metal. Then the floor shifted, just slightly, like it had turned soft. I turned to leave, but the museum had changed. The walls curved, the ceiling rippled. The door I came through no longer existed. Voices drifted from the corners, familiar ones. I heard Anna, Tamar, even my own voice, distant and slow. In the center of the room, the altar began to rise, not fast, like it was remembering how to exist. Smoke coiled up from its base, forming the outline of the god. Not a body, a presence. I stepped back, but my feet sank slightly into the ground. I was being pulled toward it. Then Finn appeared. He'd followed me. He grabbed my arm and yanked me free. The pull snapped. We ran through the side hall, dodging exhibits that flickered between reality and something older. Maura met us at the emergency exit. She held out her hand. The mask was in it, whole, uncracked. She told me to take it and speak its name, but I didn't know it. The smoke surged. Time slipped. I looked at Finn. His eyes weren't scared, just certain. He stepped in front of me, spoke a word I still can't recall. The smoke paused, then collapsed. We were outside. It was morning. The museum was empty. Maura was gone, so was the altar, the replica, all of it. Classes resumed. Finn acted like nothing happened, but at night he keeps the lights on. always. I never heard the drums again. But once, during a storm, I found my window open. On the sill sat the mask, dry, untouched by rain, still cold. The semester break felt like the first real breath I'd taken since Oaxaca. I went home to my aunt's cabin in Colorado. No Wi-Fi, no city noise, just trees and old furniture that smelled like cedar. The first night, I slept like I hadn't in months. The second night, I dreamed of water, still and black, stretching out past the horizon. I was standing in it, not sinking, not floating, just stuck. In the morning, I noticed the window latch was undone. The wind wasn't strong, but the curtains had shifted. I locked it again and didn't mention anything to my aunt. Later that day, she asked if I'd brought a friend. I said no. She said she saw someone walking toward the woods. Tall, dark hair, bare feet. I told her it must have been a hiker. That evening, a knock came at the back door. Not loud, just one. Then silence. I opened it. No one was there. But in the snow, I saw a footprint. Only one. That night, I called Maura. Her number didn't work. I called Finn. He said he hadn't dreamed since the museum, that maybe I needed to let it go. But I could hear something in his voice, something he wasn't saying. I stayed up late, writing in my journal. I kept glancing at the fireplace, feeling like something should be there. At exactly 2:03 a.m., the clock on the wall stopped ticking. Everything went still, no sound, no wind. Then I saw her, a woman standing just past the tree line, pale dress, hair like mine, but older. Her face looked too familiar. I blinked, and she was gone. In the morning, I went to the attic. I don't know why. I just felt drawn. I found a trunk with old photos, some black and white. One of them showed the same woman. On the back, in fading ink, someone had written Elira, 1897. My aunt said it was a distant relative, said she vanished one winter and was never found. She'd been studying local burial sites near the river. I walked to the river that afternoon. There were no trails, but I followed something, a feeling, maybe instinct, maybe memory. At the bank, I found a circle of stones. In the center, a single wooden figure, roughly carved. It had no face, just the outline of a mask. When I reached for it, a voice behind me spoke. "You've crossed twice, few ever do." It was the woman from the woods. Her eyes were calm. She called herself Sarah. She said she was once like me, bound to a promise made by another version of herself. She said the god didn't want worship, it wanted remembrance, a thread to keep its form alive. The mask was the anchor. As long as I kept it, it would return. I asked what would happen if I let go. Sarah only pointed toward the water. I looked down. My reflection didn't move. When I turned back, she was gone. I left the figure where it was. I walked home without speaking. That night, I placed the mask in the fireplace. I didn't burn it, just left it there. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't hear drums. But the clock hasn't worked since. And when I walk past the mirror, I don't always see myself. I hadn't planned to return to the university archives. I was only back in the city for a few days, visiting Finn and trying to feel normal. The building was mostly empty during winter break. That's probably why I noticed the figure watching me from the second floor. She looked like me again. Not exactly, but enough. Like a shadow built from memory. I told Finn, but he brushed it off, said stress makes the mind recycle faces. Still, I went back the next morning. Alone. I walked the same hall where I'd seen her. Nothing was there, just old maps and locked cabinets. But as I turned to leave, a woman's voice whispered my name. Elira. The lights flickered once, just once, enough to catch a glimpse of movement behind the glass of the anthropology room. I stepped closer. The door was ajar. Inside, the shelves were cleared, and in the center, a mirror rested on a table. It wasn't part of any exhibit. I don't know how it got there. The frame was wood, carved with symbols I half recognized from the Aztec codices. I looked into it. My reflection blinked a half second after I did. I stepped back, left the room. But the hallway looked different. Narrower, longer, dim. From behind me, footsteps. Not rushed, careful. I turned and saw a man in old ceremonial robes, gold woven through the seams. His eyes were calm but unblinking. He said nothing, just stared. I tried to speak, couldn't. My voice wouldn't come. I backed up slowly. The mirror was still there, its surface now dark. Not reflective. I reached out without thinking. The glass felt like water. The room bent sideways. I dropped to my knees. Around me, a village I hadn't seen before formed from fog. Men, women, all silent, facing a pyramid. At the top, a figure knelt. Her back to me, her posture familiar. Sarah stood beside her, older now or maybe younger. She turned to me and said one word, "Choose." A second later, I was yanked backward by the wrist. Finn, he'd come looking. He didn't ask questions. We ran. Outside, the sun was setting, though it had only been morning when I arrived. He drove us to Mora's old office. It was empty, dusty, but behind a cabinet, I found her notebook. One line circled 3 times, 3 mirrors, 1 body. I didn't know what it meant. Still don't. Back at the apartment, Finn asked if I'd seen my own eyes in the mirror. I hadn't noticed. He said next time I shouldn't look too long. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left every light on. And just after 2 a.m., the bathroom door creaked open on its own. Inside, the mirror fogged over, and from the other side I saw her smile, but I wasn't smiling. I took a weekend trip to visit Milo, an old friend from university who now worked as a park ranger in Arizona. He lived near a quiet canyon that stretched for miles. No cell service, just stone, wind, and silence that pressed on your ears. He'd offered his spare room, said the quiet would help clear my mind. It did, for the first night. I slept long, dreamless. But in the morning, I found small symbols scratched into the window glass, circles inside triangles. Milo said maybe birds had tapped at it. I nodded, but I knew it wasn't random. That evening, we walked to a nearby ridge. He talked about a cave system they'd recently found, said locals never went near it, something about echoes that didn't match. I felt uneasy but curious. He promised it was safe. We went in just before sunset. The air dropped colder the farther we walked. Our flashlights barely cut the dark. The first room was narrow with smooth walls, too smooth, like they'd been shaped. I ran my hand along one side and felt grooves, not natural. They formed patterns. I didn't say anything. A few feet deeper, our lights dimmed slightly, not off, just less. Milo noticed too. He called out jokingly. The echo came back slower than expected, slightly different in tone. We paused. I whispered something low. It repeated, but not what I said. It answered. I grabbed his arm. We turned back. The tunnel behind us looked longer than before. Too long. We moved fast, no words, just instinct. I could hear the whisper now, even without speaking. It wasn't coming from us. We reached a fork. It hadn't been there when we entered. Milo hesitated. I chose left. It felt familiar, though I'd never been here. The air grew warmer. Dust hung in the beam of my light like falling ash. Then we found the room. Large, circular, a hollow in the center filled with water so still it looked solid. Across the surface, something shimmered. A face, mine, but older, sad. It opened its mouth. The whisper got louder, not spoken but felt, in the ribs, in the back of my teeth. Milo dropped his flashlight. It cracked. Darkness rushed in fast. I reached for him, but he was gone. Only silence now. And that reflection, still looking up at me, I whispered his name. No answer. The water began to move, not ripple, but lift, like breath pushing against skin. Then a hand reached up, not to grab, to offer. I took a step back. The voice stopped, just like that. I turned and ran. Somehow, the way out was short. Sunlight hit my face like I hadn't seen it in days. Milo was waiting near the car, pale, quiet. He said nothing. Didn't remember leaving. We haven't spoken since. But sometimes when I walk near still water, I avoid looking down. I'm scared I might see her again, and I'm not sure if she's waiting for me or if she's already taken my place. Last spring, I stayed with Nora, a grad student researching desert folklore. She lived in a rented adobe house outside Tucson. One of those places too old to feel modern, but too new to feel haunted. At first, I liked it. Dry air, quiet nights. She had a big shelf of books, mostly handwritten journals from local archives. I spent my mornings reading and my evenings helping her sort through field notes. On the 4th night, I noticed something strange. When I spoke inside the living room, there was no echo. Not even the faintest one. It wasn't quiet. It was like sound just stopped. Nora said the house had always been like that. She called it peaceful. But my voice felt trapped, like the walls absorbed more than sound. Later that night, I walked past the hallway mirror and saw something behind me. A second shadow, even though I was alone. I turned. Nothing. I checked the mirror again. It was normal now, but I kept thinking about that missing echo. The next day, a man came by. His name was Ellis. He worked at the local museum and brought over a box of old transcriptions Nora had requested. He stayed for tea, asked about our research. He paused when he saw the house, said he'd been here before, years ago during a survey. But the house had been empty then. No records, no owner. Just there. I didn't sleep well that night. Around 2 a.m., I heard soft humming, not music, more like a single tone, almost like a voice holding one note. It came from under the floor. I stood still for nearly 5 minutes. The humming didn't stop. I wanted to wake Nora, but something told me not to. The next morning, I finally asked her why the floor felt warm in that room. She brushed it off, said the sun heated the foundation, but it was colder outside than in. I asked Ellis. He looked uneasy. Said the house had been built on an old site where travelers once stopped to leave offerings. Not bodies, just names. Words whispered into jars and buried. Nora didn't believe it. She thought it was poetic myth. But that night, I found one. A small jar behind the crawlspace panel. Inside was a slip of paper. It had one word, mine. No one wrote it. No ink, just pressed into the fiber. I tried to show it to Nora, but when I opened the jar again, the paper was blank. She thought I was tired. Maybe I was. The final night, the humming returned, louder this time. It vibrated through the bed frame. I got up and walked toward the living room. No echo again, just that sound, rising gently. Then it stopped. In the silence, a voice spoke from behind me. Not loud, not urgent, just curious. Why are you still here? I turned, but no one was there. Just the mirror. And in it, my reflection stood a second too long before moving. In the morning, I packed and left without saying goodbye. Nora never called. 2 weeks later, I looked up the address. The house doesn't exist on any map, but sometimes if I speak in empty rooms and hear no echo, I wonder if I've stepped back inside.